It's workshop. We better wait.
Paul don't mind waiting for 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Different way.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
What do I call this?
Work
Workshop to
session.
discuss IT?
IT.
IT workshop.
Yeah.
I gotta call, is this a
Okay.
public meeting? Shannon, you,
Yes.
it is. Oh, there's actually an agenda. Okay,
A long day.
all right. Hope this hasn't been on the record. Has this been recorded? Hi, everybody. Okay, call it.
Here all week.
This workshop on IT dated today. We have to have a roll call.
Yep. Mrs. Rhodey. Here. Mr. Bonema.
Yes.
Mr. Barry.
Yes.
Mr. Georgezma.
Here.
Mrs. Wenzel. Here. Mrs. Miedema. Here. Mr. Zylstra.
Yes.
Mr. Teeples.
Yes.
Here.
And Mr. Kyers.
Here.
And Mr. Moss is absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Any public comments? See none. Let's move on. Paul, it's all yours.
Mr. Roseman, did you want to tee it up?
Go ahead.
Gary, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first off, let me assure you, this won't be a discussion about technology. You'll see. Fire up the presentation,
I
Shannon.
don't know if that was ominous or exciting.
No.
Wow. Which way that was.
This has to do with a CIP program. I briefed the administrators on our need for an additional $1 million. And of course, I had to explain why. And our administrator suggested you really ought to do this, in a work session with the commission instead of just bringing you a approval process. So I have a presentation. This won't take long. Nope. No, I'm just going to talk to it. Okay, Ottawa County has 2 data centers. We have one at Fillmore and one in Grand Haven, smaller one. Our intent is to consolidate those 2 data centers into one data center. It has all of our file stores and about 300 servers. Am I doing this right? Yeah. Which button do I push? That works. In the last 4 or 5 years, we've basically moved about 40% into the cloud and to software as a service. At our 2 data centers, we virtually have virtual servers, about 500 servers. We replace these servers on average every 5 years. We are now at year 6. Go ahead and hit the next. I'll just tell you to hit the next because this is. Yep. One of the other things that we're planning is to move our telephony capabilities also into the cloud. So you've seen a lot of software, you've heard a lot of words today, even about subscription services and virtual services and cloud and all kinds of other technology. But this is, like I said, is not a technology discussion. Go ahead, next. Back in FY23, we had a approved capital improvement project to refresh these at $1.2 million, 1.2 and change. We chose to wait for an additional year because we had other priorities to deal with. And don't know if that was a wise decision, but it is what it is. Next one. Today it costs $2.2 or $2.3 million. So what's changed in the last couple of months and why the increase beyond inflation over the last couple of years? Go ahead. Because the scope, the footprint, the capability and capacity of what we're talking about here hasn't changed at all in this time frame. Next slide. 2 big things. One, I added our vendors sitting here with us, People Driven Technologies. They gave me a updated budgetary quote for our CIP. And I added to their $1.1 million worth of equipment a 25% tariff because all the equipment that we're going to be installing is assembled in Mexico. So that adds, you're going to have to move the move the little picture thing. Because I can't see my numbers and I don't have it in front of me.
The tables underneath the,
Video.
Yeah, you can see it, but we can't. There you go. That's the important part right there. That adds $278,000 to this project. Hardware maintenance is basically the same. VMware subscription adds $460,000 to this. So what happened there? Broadcom, which is a mega IT company, bought VMware for $61 billion not too long ago. They no longer support perpetual licenses. What does that mean? We buy licenses and we can use them from one server to another server to another server. So you now have to enter into a subscription deal. There are two ways to look at a subscription deal. One is as a bundle for 5 years, or you do it an individual year-to-year basis. The bundle year saves us an estimated $361,000 over the course of that 5 years. Remember, we change the equipment every 5 years. We're already in year 6. We thought we were saving some money. We're at end of life on this equipment. We need to replace it. Add in the VMware subscription to this, and you see why we get to $2.2 million. So like I said when I started, this adds $1 million without changing scope, footprint, capability, or capacity. It just adds dollars. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. So last year when I talked about VMware, which was just bought by Broadcom, we budgeted $38,000. We got an invoice that was $280,000 or 280% more this year for that 1 year. You follow me? I know. You can read about this in the news. And even the Broadcom discussion is universally used from a VMware perspective and is impacting not just governments, but impacting every company out there right now. Also note that beyond end of life of our equipment, support ends at the end of this month for what we have today. Doesn't freak us all out. We've patched, we've set things up, but we can't wait for a long period of time. We're at risk. That's my presentation. Absolutely. Want to go back to the important slides? That's a good one.
So what if we change vendors or wait? Tell us what happens. Or can't we?
We put out an RFP a while ago now, working with fiscal, and that is coming to a contract award to you, I hope, by the next by your board meeting, actually, I hope. But this isn't, like I said, this isn't an award discussion. This is more a budgeting, how do we fund this discussion. The first thing that jumps in your mind, because I was asked by one of our administrators, are we going to really get hit with these tariffs? I think you have to plan on it at this point. I'm only talking about servers, but if we were talking about switches, which are all assembled in China, I don't know how to budget in a trade war. I put 10% in the CIP improvement for all the switches going outward. But even today, it went to 104 to 124% increase. Now there's going to be some shifting, obviously. Companies are going to move, companies are going to relocate. Who knows? Maybe they'll all end up in a more friendly tariff environment. But that's not going to happen for years. It's definitely not going to happen in the next few years while I'm here, working through these capital improvement plans.
I know that yesterday the tariffs were suspended for a lot of different countries. Was
Yep.
Mexico one of them?
Not for Mexico, not for China.
I know China. Yeah.
Taiwan to a certain extent. To put it into perspective, Taiwan Semiconductor Company and Broadcom are now trying to buy Intel. Big, deep pockets. I venture to say it's an unavoidable expense, but it's an expense that we have to attend to soon.
Where would the money come from?
I've had conversations with fiscal. I mean, if we just add to our current CIP, so we would take out maybe the 460,000 out of that 228, the 2,286,000, right? It makes it look more palatable, but the numbers just shift to other locations. So I'm not sure we can, because there's a thing called prepaids, right? And subscription costs are being, because really the VMware is not a depreciable asset. So we'd be prepaid, but that's just an accounting function. That's not a total budgeting function. That just says we're gonna pay for it. It'll hit our business units over the course of the next 5 years.
I guess what I'm asking is, for a little deeper dive there is, Karen, do we have $1.1 million sitting in an account that's not already been designated for something that we can use this for? Or that we can use it for this?
There was a project that came forward for the prosecuting attorney's office recently that they had, there was a CIP and it was almost $500,000 that they had found an alternative funding. Was their professional organization. Carpel, thank you. Thank you. And so the combination of that organization funding and then our cost is really falling into their operational budget. So having them budget for that in their operational budget, that's $500,000 that we could use towards this. And then I was just waiting for final numbers. There's fund balance in the capital improvement plan that we could use towards this too. And then just looking at the CIP and where we are, there's a couple other projects that had some savings. So we're kind of as a CIP team going through that right now, but there will be funding for it. I mean, if we have to do this, we're not going to be unsecure.
Carrie, or maybe you can answer this too, that, does the tariffs, would that fall under insurance authority or is that stretching it? Does the tariffs fall under insurance authority or is that stretching? Don't you know?
Yeah.
I hate to put you on the spot, but it's a question, right?
We'd have to look at the memo of understanding, I think. But I'd just be worried about tariffs and market coming at the same time.
Okay.
The memo of understanding, so that would be, because I worry about the tariffs in the market.
Yeah.
What's going to happen in the market if the tariffs hit? I mean,
I have a question
Maybe.
looking at this graphic. What exactly is VMware? Is that a service or is it a? I mean.
VMware is think of it as a software. It's a software that, if you look at the picture in the back, right? So a data center is made up of a whole bunch of storage, a whole bunch of disks, a whole bunch of CPUs, a whole bunch of things that get cut up virtually into individual servers. It's no longer a physical device, one server to one device. It's a grouping of capabilities that just get sliced and diced virtually into individual servers.
How does anybody explain a 280% price increase?
Thank you. Yeah, that's pretty much what what the whole blogosphere is talking about. Do you have anything to add to these, guys?
I think another factor that
You're welcome to.
explained is that there are very few companies that provide this information or this equipment. And it's really kind of a monopoly situation. You really can't go elsewhere.
Yeah, you're
Find another
stuck.
buy.
Wow.
And when we talk about the actual equipment, and we use Dell equipment, right? You can use alternatives. But when we talk about the software that sits on top of that orchestrates all of how it's used, which is why probably Broadcom bought them.
So just brainstorming, like I realized that I was the only one today that voted against the chatbot. But that was 1/10 of what we're looking for at the moment. And that is a luxury item at the moment. And so anything that we could potentially look to delay, that's not an emergency level, something to consider. That's what I would be doing at my home if I was looking at my budget. I'm just shooting out ideas.
I have a question for Karen, if I may. Karen, on page 11 of the audit, I don't understand how all of this funding works together, but let me just read a sentence and maybe you can explain it. So it talks about 42 million has been committed by the board for specific purposes. This is under fund statement financial analysis. Over 8 million has been assigned by the county administrator for specific purposes, and about 35 million is unassigned fund balance and is available for spending at the county's discretion. I assume that's not something we normally want to do, but would those kinds of funds be available if we have an emergency?
Yes. So so I mean, generally when we are coming up with a budget, and projects are put in, I mean, that would be a real emergency to start saying to people, we've planned something, we're not doing that anymore.
Right.
So there's also looking at fund balance reserve, and we haven't talked about this yet. I've met with administrator and Ron to talk about it, but the amount of fund balance that we have in the reserves and if we're exceeding policy. And so coming back to the board now that we've presented the audit and talking that through and what we do with that, whether it's the defined benefit or, how that would be used. And that has frequently been used to fund one-time initiatives like these types of things. I didn't know if I should start that kind of conversation here today.
I know, I didn't know if I should either.
Well, I mean, the board also gave the board initiatives, we gave 5 million towards the CIP. This is technically a CIP project. A philosophy towards budgeting is we really try to live within
Right.
the confines of how we budget things. The board's given the CIP team $5 million a year. That's how we've planned. That's really how we structure to live within. I really believe that we can make this fit into that based on what I've seen. So that's where I would start.
Okay.
How much of that do we have left? All of it, Karen?
Um,
5 million that we set aside?
I think we've probably used some to,
Big chunk of it there, as I remember, right?
right, because we wanted to work the general fund through growth up to that 5 million. And that 5 million was a little arbitrary.
Right.
Is that the amount that we need to invest in capital projects a year? So we're still trying to figure that out. What is that amount the county needs to invest in the capital improvement plan on an annual basis? A permanent facilities director would go a long way at helping that happen. But working towards that, working under that 5 million that the board gave from board initiatives during this growth period was going to offset the short years. So as we were going to use this, as we grew, and that we were going to have that 5 million. And so having that plan and using that funding. So when we set a budget, we set contingencies, we have reserves, and we try to live within that. And I guess maybe I didn't answer it, but I do believe that we have funding in the current, maybe it's not appropriated for this project, but within projects, maybe I'll have to move around a little bit. I was just waiting for final numbers to be able to answer that question.
So do you think, could you potentially give us a list of the funds you think that we can kind of put together so we know where we're at?
So that's what the CIP team is. We're kicking off the 26 project. That's what we were, like, all of this is kind of happening at the same time. Like Paul kind of came to the team, these tariffs came up, and then he presented to, and then he was having a separate conversation, the RFP for all this kind of just happened in the last couple of days. And so there are a couple of projects. I think there's probably, I honestly don't know the exact amount because the new interim facilities director, I'm not entirely sure, agreed 100% with the previous facilities director. So I want to check to make sure that all of that is still solid, right?
Okay.
And so, and then I know there's fund balance there because I know there's that $5 million. So I know that, or what's left of that. So I know that there's money there. So I know that this can be funded and then we can shift and manage within that. I mean, I know that to be 100% certainty. I also know there's excess fund balance from 9/30/24 that there'll be opportunity to make decisions and balance. I mean, I know that. And that's one-time money. That's not something that you can start a new program because it's not ongoing. It's not revenue that's going to replenish next year and the year after and the year after. So it's not ongoing revenue.
Paul, can we delay this or are we past that point?
It would not be my recommendation to delay it. I want to make this really clear. We planned to replace these systems. We've been in this cycle every 5 years for as long as I've been here. We've got our capital program of refresh down. What we didn't plan for was tariffs and Broadcom buying VMware. So it's a kind of a surprise. I don't know if I'd call it an emergency. It's an emergency, like Karen mentioned. You know, something's broken. It's, oh my gosh, now we got to fix it. This is something that we had anticipated. We just didn't anticipate it to be this big.
Is this like a one-time cost that should, or for at least once for 5 years, kind of a cost that we just need to get over this hump, or is this a ongoing situation?
Is what an ongoing?
The tariffs are probably not,
The tariffs,
probably not a one-time thing. but
probably
that's
not a
what-
one-time situation.
I'm seeing $2,286,150.
Yeah.
What do we get for $2,286,000? Is that a one-time thing or is that?
That's it. We would be refreshing that again in future
5
years, in 5 years.
So it's not an annual thing, it's
Correct.
about every 5 years.
That's correct. And I've been asked by others, you know, do I anticipate? I mean, I'm no expert at this tariff game either, but even if the assembly was brought into the United States, it's going to be 25% plus on an increase because just the cost of living in the United States versus assembling these things in Mexico or China.
Why did we go from six instead of 5? What was the reasoning for that, Paul?
Well, we weren't experiencing any failures. We were confident that we got other priorities that we were trying to attend to, and we were still working on a design to consolidate the 2 data centers. Yeah, I mean, it was like, okay, I mean, we take minimal risks.
Hindsight's pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
Been down that road before.
You know, but when your vendor, you know, can't repair it anymore, be it back in the days of COVID when we actually couldn't get equipment, or this whole world scale activity,
Mhm.
and I'm putting Broadcom on that list as world scale activity. Yeah, do I see this changing? No, I think it's going to be similar in price plus inflation 5 years from now. But what I can't predict for you similarly is we're going to need to refresh a big chunk of our switches, our network switches, and I can't even fathom what that looks like in terms of cost right now.
So you had mentioned earlier that at the end of this month, the equipment will stop being supported. Is that because of it's past its useful life cycle, or?
No.
because-
The VMware won't be supported anymore, which means we won't get patches, we won't get fixes. So we have been for the last several weeks desperately updating, upgrading everything that we could.
So if we.
So if we waited till, you know, a couple months to work this all through, we're not going to lose any sleep. If we push this through the CIP process past October, working our way, things may not go well.
So, but the VMware will be supported if we.
VMware support will end at the end of this month, but it'll work.
Yes, unless we fund this 2,200,000.
We still have to go through the process of contracting, and we still have to go through the process of getting, you know, the details worked out, but then we will be able to resubscribe. How, from a funding standpoint, I don't know.
This is because of an end of the subscription, not because it's no longer a service that they provide.
More specifically, we rely today mostly on perpetual licenses that won't be supported anymore. So the idea that I'm not sure when all that materialized, but in the last couple of months, I learned that you're no longer going to be able to do that. Use a perpetual license. They're not going to update your perpetual license. You have to be under a subscription. You hear this in every software that this is a trend industry-wide. So the Fiddler subscription, Microsoft subscription, everything's a subscription now. It's not something you buy and you can just continue to use until it fails.
How certain are you that this is a $2.2 million project or more? I mean, are you asking for enough?
So like I said, people-driven technology is sitting behind me. We asked them for an updated quote based on existing capability and capacity, and they work with us so they know what we have and where we have it.
Okay.
And they gave me an updated quote based on today.
Okay.
The only thing that I don't see the VMware subscription side changing, but the tariff thing could continue to change.
So how good's the quote? How long is the quote good for?
Terry quote.
Okay.
Am I doing you guys right? It's a budgetary quote. You know, I mean,
Well, is that?
when we get back under contract, and we're probably going to recommend, when we get back under contract, one of the first things we're going to do is redesign this and get down to the baseline details. I don't see it going up, but I don't see it going down either.
What do you want the board to do with this information right now?
I think we just wanted you to be aware.
Be aware. And you guys will go out and work out the details.
Yeah, well, we will be bringing you a recommendation for award and a contract.
And then Karen,
But Karen's going to want to know that there's funding for it.
right.
Because I asked her, can we execute based on the 1.2 that's already approved and then just add to it? You didn't like that idea.
We're gonna have to add.
I don't blame you. You know, that's like getting started on a house and you only have half of it.
Yeah.
See?
Could we possibly have an update at the next board meeting on this? Because I recognize our next finance meeting is not for another month,
Yeah.
so should we?
Will you have something by the 22nd that you could Or is that not
Oh,
realistic?
Karen.
About a recommended funding strategy?
It's the
I'm
whole
hoping the
piece.
contract will be ready by their board. Board to award.
Whatever the final, you're gonna be ready to, or whatever.
So I don't, no. The answer there is no. So there's two parts to this. One is budgeting and one is, and one is the award. The award starts off with design. I mean, I'm not pulling a design out of the air here. Okay. But I did want to make sure from, because we're working through the CIP team right now too, make sure that everybody understood that this was going to be a hit, at least to get something planned in a budget.
You just need to know that it's gonna be.
So my hope, my hope was next at your board meeting was maybe working with administration, this is the first time you're hearing this, but to maybe bring the award, that's one thing, that's the procurement,
The award for the 2.2 or the award?
the
for
award for the vendor, which to start on the design that would end up in doing all this. And I don't know if it's called a budget amendment, whatever it would be called to increase the CIP to that, to 2.2. It's something that's, not quite tied together yet, but something that says, okay, we've put this aside.
When we heard from Paul, our thought was to try to minimize sticker shock. That's why we're here. This is gonna be expensive. Wasn't planned on, but it's a necessity. And I think Paul wants to go forward, and we know that somewhere down the road soon, we're gonna have more than $2 million to pay for it. But again, it was a sticker shock to Gary and I, and we thought you ought to know right away.
Yeah, it's good.
Can I read an email to you that just came in from a constituent? It's not from my perspective. My expertise is not your expertise. So, it was two emails. One was 5-year EOL on hardware as an IT comfort time, switches, mini bare metal servers, et cetera, will survive far longer. Some would be EOL just on security, but others will remain highly functional. Also, don't be sucked into a paid service that screws you like VMware. There are alternatives. Rebuilding is better than being bent over a barrel, and while not easy, I'd be willing to bet it's cheaper to switch to Hyper-V. And then there was a link for Microsoft. So
Are we considering alternatives? Yes. Am I basing this discussion on existing capability and capacity? Yes. And design. I'm not saying changing anything, because all we're doing is talking about budgeting here right now.
thanks.
I think it'd be nice, Karen, if you're able to, by our board meeting, come up with a list of potential funding sources. I'm moving it from here to here and here to here, whatever it is, so that we just know how much is easily available.
Sure.
And then whatever that missing component is, that's where the harder conversation comes in. And if we could know what the easy part is by the next meeting, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
For me. I don't know if anybody else feels that way.
I
See
can
some
do
nods.
I mean, again, the big thing for us is that, we're not sitting here realizing that we don't have any money for this project. We know that exists, and Sylvia, you had mentioned it too. If we can, look at where our funds are located at and put this all in perspective, but we couldn't do that until we made the board aware of the sticker shock when Paul walked into the office that day and shut us in the conference room and said, Ron, where are you going to get an extra $1 million? And again, that's the important thing. And I understand where, people are going to start saying, well, you're caught up in the war of technology. And, but, Paul made it really clear to us, we don't have a lot of options, and him and his team are looking at every option that's available, so.
So again, the contract issue that will come up to the board that you're going to propose to the board on the 22nd would be for what? Just, and Yeah.
Thought maybe you wanted to take that. It's an award to engage a professional services provider to phase one, start us with design and work us through all the way through implementation.
And then in that process, we'll be going out to bid for equipment and software subscriptions and stuff? Is that what'll happen during those different phases?
I don't know if I have an answer. for that.
Are you asking if the,
'Cause-
if the initial ask is going to be for the entire 2.3 million or in chunks?
I'm
No,
getting the impression it can't be because
You
you don't know what
can't.
that's gonna be.
right. That was my point.
Right.
That's why they're separate.
Right.
And to Commissioner Miedema's
The
listener perspective, we may be looking at alternatives other than VMware.
Right.
Agreed. And that may have budgetary impacts. Agreed.
Yeah, so we start to plan, right? We start looking at options because we may need at least 2 million or more. So we look at, with Karen's help, and we get somebody starting work on the project and
Yeah.
figuring out what we need to do to move us along to get out of this mess. I mean, cool. This is why we talk about it. It's good. I'm glad you brought it up. Really, really glad about that. Like all of us. are.
Mr. Roseman's idea. Because you got to talk to it.
I just have one question, if I might. So you're talking about the need to start, the assessment or planning or whatever. Is there a specific cost for that portion? I'm assuming that's what's going to
It
be
could
brought
be.
to us first.
Could be.
Okay.
In my experience, working in professional services and doing a lot of work with the federal government, the Department of Defense, we had not to exceed budgets. And we couldn't exceed the budget. And it may be phased with the Corps of Engineers, 5, 6, 7 steps. And you don't know what your last thing is. You don't have it all mapped out quite yet, but you can't exceed that number, right? Without bringing it back here.
Yep.
But we don't in the county necessarily follow that procurement process.
But maybe are you saying maybe we should? Because maybe.
I don't
something like
think it
that.
hurts
Yeah.
because I can't predict the world anymore. So, putting a not to exceed with maybe a the implementation and design side of things as a phase one, I'm fine.
I was just gonna suggest that for this particular contract, and I'm not sure who, but if we could do the design and that part of the contract, I mean, I understand, I think you just issued a notice of intent
Yes.
to this PeopleSoft, right?
People driven is
People
currently
driven,
our vendor.
sorry,
Sure.
people driven. And so we could do the contract on the 27th for the design phase to a not to exceed
Good.
and start with that. There's currently plenty of budget in the CIP for that portion. I could also find or present options for the remainder. The project could move forward into the design phase. I don't know how long the design phase, potentially that phase takes, like days, weeks. So we would then, the next month,
Yeah, we can do that.
potentially be prepared and ready to go for the next phase? Is
Oh.
that a reasonable?
I've been involved in lots of construction projects, work with construction managers or general contractors, right? So with architects, and the architects would come in and at the beginning of a project and they'd say, okay, this is our fee, right? And then they put out a time schedule about performance. Sounds like that's really what we're going to be doing here. You're going to bring forth a design contract with a professional service group, and there's going to be a fee associated with it, right? And with that, somehow you'll have a design, a schedule of performance, right? And then you'll go about going out for an RFP and all those other things you're going to need to do to finally get it there. That's kind of what I'm hearing in my head as the process would go. Am I pretty close to that?
The part that, it can go that way. And we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I also don't want to get bogged down in the, well, if we use this type of equipment versus this type of equipment, I don't want to get into a bid scenario. I want to make sure that whoever designs this can implement this.
Oh, oh,
I don't want somebody who's just showing up
oh.
who hasn't already committed their design to try and implement it. Because now we get into finger pointing.
But Paul, architects do this all the time. They,
Mhm.
they design it, then they go out to bid to who's gonna do
Who's
the work.
gonna, who's gonna physically build it?
Yeah,
A certified contractor.
but what you're saying is the vendor you would use, this gentleman, right? You would expect to use them all the way through the end of the project.
So again, back to my experience. If I'm a consultant, I would go into a company and I would say, this is what I recommend you do. And the company, whoever the president of that company or government would turn and say, but will you make it work?
Okay,
Because this is not just putting concrete in the ground and building things. This is pieces and parts that all have to work together. And has to be supported going forward. So I hesitate when you, well, let's break it apart. And that's possible. And if it's unreasonable, assure you, if anything coming back on phase 2 looks unreasonable, that's exactly what we would have to do. But if we have a professional service company that's here working with us, knows what we're trying to achieve, and is recommending all the pieces and parts to make it work, then make it work.
how do we, with all due respect to them, I'm sure they've been here, they've done great work,
Years.
obviously.
Mhm.
This is not a reflection on you guys at all. But we have obligations to publicly bid many things. This is taking that whole process out of the equation, right?
And I would get 4 different design opinions for the same outcome. Well, here's an example, not just alternatives that was already mentioned by Allison. Well, why don't you just pull it all and put it into the cloud? Well, that's not an easy lift. Well, why don't we use a different product line? Like, why don't we skip using Cisco and we'll start using Fortinet? Except every engineer I have is Cisco certified. So am I going to go rehire new certified people? And we don't have a bench. We've got 4. And we rely on our professional service vendors to be there in case we need help, which happens, like today. So I think there's ways that this can proceed. I'm familiar with them. But what's the best way for Ottawa County? Not what's the easiest way. Well, let's wait and see what happens. I'm not going to be, like what you all were listening to with measles. But in my world, in our world, things just stop. And if things just stop, we all stop. So the 5-year comment, it's fair. You can push this out to 7. I'm okay with it at 7. I wouldn't necessarily want to make a practice at that because we're already at 6. And that was our choice. I took that risk. But 10? No. My Mac never breaks. But then you can't upgrade it anymore. I use that one as an example because it's amazing. I got 3 of these things at home. They all work. Just can't use them all anymore.
You can just help me with my password. I'm happy.
Stuff like that.
That's all.
So bring it forth to the board.
Yeah.
And start looking at options, Karen, and we'll talk some more, right? I think that's all we can do.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. And can't thank you all enough. I mean, truly can't thank you enough for bringing this to all of us. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn? John, that's you.
Well, I got public comment yet.
Yes.
Oh, right, it's a
Yeah,
meeting.
I have to ask for public comment. I don't see any. Okay.
Anybody online?
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you so much.